It's a Spotify podcast.
You pushed me down, thought I'd stay on the ground, counting me.
How to shut down a manipulator without losing control. What if I told you that most manipulation depends on one thing, your reaction? Not their intelligence, not their power, not their ability to read minds, your reaction. They need you angry. They need you scared. They need you confused. They need you defending yourself. They need you talking too fast. They need you making decisions before you've had time to understand the question. And most importantly, they need emotionally involved, because the moment your emotions take control of the conversation, somebody else may be able to control the direction of it. My name is LeRoy Nellis. This is Resilience Radio. And today we're going to talk about manipulators. We're going to talk about people who use guilt, people who use fear, people who create urgency, people who twist conversations, people who make you explain yourself over and over again. And we're going to talk about something I had to learn the very hard way. You do not defeat manipulation by becoming a better manipulator. You defeat manipulation by becoming harder to emotionally move. Because when somebody cannot control your emotional temperature, they have a much harder time controlling your decisions. Let's get into it. The first thing you need to understand, manipulation usually does not begin with a command. Think about that. Most manipulators don't walk up and say, "Hello, I'm about to manipulate you." That would make life a hell of a lot easier. Instead, manipulation usually arrives as disguised as something else: concern, disappointment, urgency, loyalty, love, fear, sometimes even kindness. The words themselves may sound completely reasonable, but underneath those words is pressure. And pressure is what they need to learn and recognize. I developed a simple way of thinking about this. I call it the pressure check. When someone says something that immediately creates a strong emotional reaction in me, I mentally ask 3 questions. What am I suddenly feeling? What am I suddenly being pushed to do? And why does this decision apparently need to happen right now? Those 3 questions have saved me from a lot of bad conversations, because manipulators often depend on emotional speed. They don't want analysis. They want reaction. Think about a salesperson who tells you this deal is only available for the next 10 minutes. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. But what happened? A clock just appeared. Now you're not evaluating the product. You're racing the clock. That's a psychological pressure. Now imagine somebody in your personal life saying, "If you really love me, you wouldn't have to think about it." There's the pressure. Love has now been attached to compliance. You are no longer discussing the decision. You're defending whether you love the person. That's a completely different conversation. And that is exactly how manipulation works. The original subject disappears. Now you're defending yourself. Watch where the conversation moves. This is one of the biggest things I've learned. Pay attention to where conversation starts and where it ends. Somebody asks you for something. You say no. 5 minutes later, you're defending your childhood. How the hell did we get here? Seriously, think about some of the arguments you've had. The conversation begins with, "Can you help me Saturday?" You say, "I can't. I already have plans." Suddenly you're hearing, "You've always been selfish." Wait, what? We were talking about Saturday. Now we're discussing my entire personality? That is conversational expansion. The subject gets bigger because the original request did not produce the desired result. A manipulative person may expand the battlefield. Now it's not Saturday, it's every Saturday. It's not one decision, it's your character. It's not one disagreement, it's your entire relationship. Listen for words like always, never, everybody, nobody, every time, your whole life. Those words can sometimes be legitimate, but they can also be emotional gasoline. You never listen to me. Never? Not one time. In every conversation we've had, I have never listened? That is probably not literally true. But if I become defensive, I might start listing examples. Remember last March? What about your birthday? I listened when you had a problem at work. Now look what happened. I'm defending myself. The original issue has disappeared. The manipulator controls the conversation because I'm now trying to prove that I'm a good person. This is why I say stop defending your entire life against a 5-minute accusation. You don't have to do that. The power of pause. Here's one of the most powerful things you can do when somebody pressures you. Nothing. I'm serious. Nothing. Pause. People are terrified of silence, especially people who are trying to control the pace of a conversation. They ask a loaded question. You don't answer immediately. Pause. They stare at you. You stare back. Pause. Now something interesting happens. The person who created the pressure may begin to feel the pressure. Why? Because they expected a reaction. Maybe they expected anger. Maybe they expected an explanation. Maybe they expected you to apologize. Maybe they expected you to immediately say yes. Instead, nothing. Silence creates space, and space gives your brain time to catch up with your emotions. Let me give you an example. Someone says, "So I guess you're just going to abandon me like everybody else." That's a hell of a statement. Your immediate reaction may be, "I'm not abandoning you." Now you're in it. You accepted the frame. The conversation is not about whether you're abandoning them, but what if you pause? Pause. And then say, "What exactly are you asking me to do?" That's different. Very different. You move the conversation away from the emotional accusation and toward the concrete request. What exactly are you asking me to do? Memorize that question. Put it in your pocket, because vague emotional pressure is powerful. Specific requests are easier to evaluate. Turn the accusation into a request. Manipulators often hide requests inside of accusations. Let me say that again. They hide requests inside accusations. Instead of saying, "I would like you to spend more time with me," they say, "You obviously don't care about me." Instead of saying, "Can you help me with this project?" they say, "I guess I'll just do everything myself like always." Instead of saying, "I'm worried about this decision," they say, "You're going to destroy everything." See the difference? One is a request or a concern. The other is an emotional pressure. So here's what I started doing. I translate the accusation into a request. Someone says, "You don't care about me." I might say, "It sounds like you're asking for more time with me. Is that what you're asking?" Now the conversation has changed. They have choices. Yes or no. If they say yes, great. Now we can discuss time. If they say no, then I might ask, "Then what are you asking me for?" Again, specifically, manipulation loves fog. Clarity is a flashlight. The clearer the request becomes, the harder it is to hide the pressure tactic. Ask what they actually want. One of my favorite questions now is brutally simple. What do you want? That's it. What do you want? Not, why are you angry? Not, why are you treating me this way? Not, what did I do wrong? What do you want? Because sometimes people will talk 20 minutes without actually telling you what they actually want. They're describing your failures. They're describing your pain. They're describing what everybody else thinks. They're bringing up 2017. They'll bring up your ex. They'll bring up your mother. Hell, if you give them enough time, they'll bring up something you did in the 3rd grade. But they still haven't answered the original question. What do you want? A decision, money, time, an apology, access, attention, agreement, control. What is the desired outcome? When I started asking that question, I noticed something. Some people become uncomfortable. Why? Because stating the actual request makes it visible. And once the request is visible, you can say yes or no. Manipulation often exists in a space before the request becomes clear. The person wants you moving toward an outcome without openly stating the outcome. Don't move in the fog. Ask for the destination. Stop answering questions that were never asked. This one's huge. People under emotional pressure tend to over-explain. I know, I've done it. Someone questions your decision. You give them the complete documentary. Episode 1, Episode 2, behind the scenes, director's commentary, everything. You start explaining every detail because you believe more information will create an understanding. Sometimes it does, but with a manipulative person, more information may simply create more material. You say, I can't come Saturday because I have to finish this project. And I've been behind because Tuesday I had an appointment and then Wednesday my computer crashed. Stop. You just gave them 4 new doors. Why did you fix the computer? What appointment? Why are you behind? Why can't the project wait? Now you're answering questions about your entire schedule. The original answer was, I can't come Saturday. That may be enough. This is something I have to learn. An explanation is not always required for a boundary to be valid. Sometimes the complete sentence is no. Now, I'm not saying walk around and being a complete asshole. And I'm not saying refuse normal communication. Healthy relationships involve explanations. But there is a difference between explaining and being interrogated until the answer changes. Learn the difference. Watch for emotional debt. Some people keep an invisible ledger. They remember everything they've ever done for you. And the moment you say no, they open the books. After everything I've done for you, there it is, emotional debt. Now, sometimes people have a legitimate concerns about unequal relationships. That is real. If one person gives constantly and the other person takes constantly, that needs to be discussed. But manipulation occurs when generosity is secretly converted into future control. I did this for you. Therefore, you owe me obedience. I help you. Therefore, you cannot disagree with me. I supported you. Therefore, I get access to your decisions. That's not generosity. That's a loan with a hidden interest. And nobody showed you the contract. When somebody says, after everything I've done for you, I want you to slow down. Do not immediately defend yourself. You might say, I appreciate what you've done for me. What are you asking me for right now? Notice what happened. You acknowledged the history, but you did not surrender the present decision. That's very important. Gratitude and obedience are not the same thing. You can appreciate someone and still say no. Fear is a powerful lever. Fear moves people. Every marketer knows this. Every politician knows it. Every con artist knows it. Every abusive person knows it. Fear compresses thinking. When people become afraid, they want fear to stop. And sometimes they'll make decisions simply to end the emotional discomfort. If you don't do this, you'll regret it. If you leave, nobody will ever love you. If you tell anyone, everything will get worse. If you don't agree right now, the opportunity is gone. Notice the pattern. Threat, urgency, decision. That combination should immediately get your attention. When someone introduces fear and then demands an immediate decision, I call that red light moment. Stop. Do not speed up. Slow down. Ask, what specifically do you believe is going to happen? Make them describe the threat. Specificity matters. If I leave, nobody will ever love me. How exactly do you know that? If I don't agree today, everything is ruined. What exactly is ruined? If I tell someone everything gets worse, what exactly are you saying will happen? Bring the fear out of the shadows, because vague fear grows. Specific claims can be examined. Guilt is not proof. Feeling guilty does not automatically mean you did something wrong. I wish somebody had explained this to me years ago. Seriously. Guilt is an emotion. It can be useful. Healthy guilt can tell us when we violated our own values. If I hurt someone, guilt may motivate me to apologize. That's healthy. But guilt can also be triggered by somebody else's disappointment. Those are not the same thing. Sometimes someone can be disappointed in your decision, and your decision can still be right. Let that sink in. Someone can be angry with your boundary, and your boundary can still be healthy. Someone can cry when you say no, and no can still be the correct answer. This is difficult with people with empathy, because empathetic people feel other people's discomfort, and manipulators may learn that. They may not even consciously sit down and create some evil master plan. Sometimes people simply repeat behaviors that have worked. They cry, you surrender. Their brain learns crying changed the outcome. They become angry, you surrender. Their brain learns anger changed the outcome. They withdraw. You chase them. Their brain learns silence creates pursuit. Human beings learn patterns. So do manipulators. The question is, what are you teaching people about how to control you? Control the emotional temperature. Imagine two people arguing. One person is yelling. The other person starts yelling. Now the emotional temperature rises. The first person gets louder. The second person gets louder. Congratulations, nobody is listening. Everybody is broadcasting. One of the strongest things you can do is refuse to match emotional escalation. Someone gets louder, you get slower. Someone speaks faster, you pause longer. Someone becomes dramatic, you become specific. This is not a weakness, it's an emotional control. And here's what happens. When one person is screaming and the other person is speaking calmly, the contrast becomes visible, very visible. The emotional tactic loses some of its camouflage. I might say, I want to understand you. I'm not going to continue while we're yelling. That's a boundary. Notice I didn't say, you're crazy. I didn't say, calm down. By the way, telling an angry person to calm down has probably never calmed anyone down in the history of humanity. It's almost impressive how badly that phrase works. Instead, I'm willing to continue this conversation when we can both speak normally. Then stop. The boundary means nothing if you keep arguing for another 45 minutes. A boundary without enforcement is a suggestion. Name what is happening. Sometimes you need to bring the behavior into the open, calmly, not dramatically, not as an attack. Just name what you're observing. It feels like you're trying to make me feel guilty. It sounds like you're asking me to make this decision because you're angry. I notice the conversation keeps moving away from the original question. It seems like we're discussing my character instead of the actual issue. These statements are powerful because covert pressure works best when nobody names it. Imagine a magic trick. The illusion works because you don't see the mechanism. Once someone shows you where the card went, the trick loses some of its power. Manipulation can work the same way. Bring the mechanism into the light. But here's the key. Do it very calmly. If you scream, "You're manipulating me," you created a new fight. Now you're arguing about whether they're a manipulator. Instead say, "I feel pressured to answer before I've had time to think." That's hard to argue with. You're describing your experience. Or when you say, "I'll regret it if I don't agree," I hear that as pressure. Again, specific, calm, visible. Curiosity is stronger than defensiveness. One of the best tools I've learned in curiosity, manipulators expect resistance. They know how to fight resistance, but questions can change the dynamic. Why do you believe that? What makes this urgent? What outcomes are you looking for? Why is my immediate agreement important? What would happen if I took 24 hours to think? Why does my disagreement mean I don't care? Those questions force other persons to explain the logic. And sometimes the logic falls apart when spoken aloud. Someone says, "If you love me, you would agree." You ask, "Why does disagreement mean lack of love?" Now, they have to explain that. Maybe they can. Maybe there is a legitimate issue underneath the statement. Good. Then discuss it. But maybe they can't. And maybe the statement was designed to create guilt, communicate logic. Questions reveal structure. And I like structure because once I can see how something is built, I can decide whether I want to stand inside of it. Do not accept false urgency. Manipulators love clocks, not actual clocks, psychological clocks. Right now, today, before you leave, I need an answer. Why can't you just decide? Sometimes urgency is legitimate. If the building is on fire, please don't tell the firefighter, "LeRoy said you need 24 hours to process your options." Use common sense. But many personal decisions do not require immediate answers. Money, contracts, relationships, major commitments, access to your property, access to your accounts, legal decisions, business agreements. These are exactly the decisions where pressure should make you slower. I developed a personal rule. The harder someone pushes me to decide immediately, the more interested I become in waiting. Pressure does not automatically mean the deal is bad, but pressure changes my risk calculations. You say, "I need an answer right now." My response may be, then the answer is no. Why? Because if I'm not allowed, and I have learned the price of reacting. The third person test. When you're emotionally involved, it can be difficult to see manipulation. So mentally step outside the situation. Imagine your best friend tells you the exact story. They say, "This person told me that if I loved them, I would give them access to my bank account." What would you say? You'd probably say, "Are you out of your bloop mind?" But when it's happening to us, emotion changes view. So use the third person test. Ask, if my daughter told me this story, what would I tell her? If my best friend described this conversation, what would I notice? If I watched this interaction in a documentary, what would I think? Distance changes perception. You are trying to temporarily remove your emotional investment and examine the behavior, not the person. The behavior, that's important. You don't need to diagnose someone as a narcissist. You don't need to become an internet psychologist. You don't need to assign a personality disorder. You can simply evaluate behavior. Is this person respecting my answer? Are they creating fear? Are they creating guilt? Are they demanding urgency? Are they changing the subject? Are they attacking my character instead of discussing the decision? Those are observable questions. Stop trying to win every argument. This was very difficult for me. I like facts. I like evidence. I like research. And when I know I'm right about something, I want to explain it completely with footnotes, charts, PowerPoint presentation, maybe a documentary series. Well, y'all know. I mean, if you've been following me, you know. But here's the truth. Not every person is arguing to discover the truth. Some people are arguing to exhaust you, and that's different. If the goal is truth, evidence matters. If the goal is exhaustion, the conversation continues until you surrender. You answer one accusation, another appears. You answer that, another appears. You correct one false statement, the subject changes, you follow. 2 hours later, you don't even remember how that argument started. That's not a debate, that's attrition. So I learned to ask, what exact issue are we resolving? If they change subjects, we can discuss that later. Right now, we're discussing this. If they change again, I'm staying with the original question. This is conversational discipline. One issue, one conversation, one decision. Do not chase every rabbit somebody releases into the room. The broken record. Sometimes the best response is repetition. Calm repetition. I'm not available Saturday. But you helped Steve last weekend. I understand. I'm not available Saturday. So Steve matters more than me. No, I'm not available Saturday. I knew you would do this. I hear you. I'm not available Saturday. Notice what you're not doing. You're not defending Steve. You're not ranking relationships. You're not explaining your calendar. You're not arguing about the past. You're repeating the answer. This is sometimes called the broken record technique. And yes, it can feel awkward. That's okay. Manipulation often depends on your desire to escape awkwardness. Become comfortable with little discomfort. Your future self will thank you. Controlled choices. Another useful technique is offering controlled choices. Let's say a conversation is escalating. You might say, we can continue calmly now, or we can continue tomorrow. Which do you prefer? Two choices, both acceptable to you. What do you not offer is option 3. Scream at me for another hour, or maybe someone keeps demanding an immediate answer. You might say, I can give you an answer Friday, or we can decide not to move forward. Again, 2 options, both within boundaries. Controlled choices create structure, and structure is useful when somebody is trying to create chaos. But be careful. Don't use controlled choices to manipulate other people. This is not about becoming the person you're trying to protect yourself from. The goal is clarity, not domination. When they say you have changed. Once you start setting boundaries, you may hear something interesting. You've changed. Maybe. Maybe you have. Growth is change. Healing is change. Education is change. Experience is change. If I go through hell and come out exactly the same person, I didn't learn a damn thing. Sometimes you've changed actually means the behavior that used to work on you is no longer producing the same result. Think about that. Someone who benefited from your lack of boundaries may experience your boundaries as hostility. Someone who benefited from your silence may experience your voice as aggression. Someone who benefited from your compliance may experience your independence as betrayal. That does not automatically mean you're right. We all need self-reflection. Sometimes we do become guarded. Sometimes trauma can make us suspicious. Sometimes we misread people. That is why I believe in evidence, patterns, repeated behavior, context. But I don't assume change is bad simply because someone else dislikes the new version of you. Manipulation versus normal human emotion. I need to make an important distinction. Not every emotional person is manipulative. Not every guilt-inducing statement is part of an evil strategy. People communicate badly. People get scared. People say things they regret. People exaggerate. People become insecure. I know. I've done it. You've probably done it too. The difference is often found in patterns. What happens when you identify the behavior? What does the person reflect? Do they apologize? Can they have a calmer conversation later? Can they hear no? Can they respect boundaries? Can they change? Or does the same tactic return again and again? That's what I watch. Patterns. I see patterns. One bad conversation does not define a human being. Repeated behavior after clear boundaries tells you more. I do not want people to listen to this podcast and diagnose everyone in their lives as a narcissist. The internet has enough amateur psychiatrists. Your neighbor forgets your birthday, and suddenly TikTok has diagnosed them with 3 personality disorders. Stop. Evaluate behavior. Document patterns when necessary. Set boundaries. Get professional help when the situation is serious, but stay grounded. The most powerful question. If I had to give you one question from this entire episode, it would be this. What exactly are you asking me to do? That's the question. Someone says, if you cared, you'd understand. What exactly are you asking me to do? Everybody thinks you're selfish. What exactly are you asking me to do? You know what will happen if you don't help. What exactly are you asking me to do? I guess I'll just suffer alone. What exactly are you asking me to do? Specificity destroys fog. Once the request becomes clear, you can evaluate it. Do I want to do this? Is it reasonable? Does it violate my values? Does it create risk? Do I need more information? Do I need time? Then you make a decision. Your decision. Not the decision fear made. Not the decision guilt made. Not the decision urgency made. Your decision. You do not have to attend every argument. Someone invites you into an argument. You do not have to attend. Think about that. An argument is an invitation. Sometimes the invitation sounds like, so you're not going to say anything, correct? Sometimes silence is the answer. You don't have to say anything because you know I'm right. Maybe, or maybe I've realized this conversation is going nowhere. You are not legally required to respond to every accusation somebody launches at you. You don't have to correct every misunderstanding in real time. You do not have to defend yourself against every opinion. This was a very difficult lesson for me. And it's taken a lot of years to learn. Because when somebody says something false about me, every part of me wants to respond in a very negative way. But sometimes responding gives the accusation oxygen. Sometimes the strongest move is documentation. Sometimes it's distance. Sometimes it's a lawyer. Let me repeat that. Sometimes it's a lawyer. No, I'm kidding. Sometimes it's a therapist. Sometimes it's a calm conversation. Tomorrow. And sometimes it's simply walking away. Strategy matters. Reaction is immediate. Strategy considers the outcome. Why manipulators hate uncertainty. Manipulation depends on feedback. The person watches you. Do you get angry? Did you become afraid? Did you start explaining? Did you apologize? Did you move closer? Did you walk away? Did you back away? Your reaction provides information. So when you become calm and measured, the feedback changes. Someone says something provocative. You respond. That's interesting. I'll think about it. What do they do with that? They don't know whether the tactic worked or I understand that's your opinion. That's it? No fight? No defense? No surrender? Ambiguity can protect you from being pushed into a premature position. Again, don't use this to play games with healthy people. Healthy communication benefits from honesty. But when somebody is actively pressuring you, you are allowed to take time before revealing your decision. Boundaries are not punishment. A boundary is not, you have to change. A boundary is, if this happens, this is what I'll do. That's a major difference. You need to stop yelling at me. That's a request. If yelling starts, I will end the conversation. That's a boundary. You need to stop calling me at midnight. Request. I will not answer non-emergency calls after 10. Boundary. You have to respect me. Request. If insults begin, I will leave. That's a boundary. Boundaries describe your behavior, not the other person's obedience. And that is why boundaries are powerful. You control your behavior. You do not control theirs. The other person is free to yell, and you're free to leave. They are free to call at midnight. You are free not to answer. They are free to insult you. You're free to end the conversation. Freedom works both directions. The boundary tells people what access to you requires. Do not say, if you yell again, I'm leaving. Then you say through 40 more minutes of them yelling. Why? Because you just taught the person that your boundaries are negotiable. You taught them the first no is not the real no. You taught them persistence works. If you set a boundary, make it realistic. Do not threaten someone dramatic because you're angry. I'm never speaking to you again. Then you call them 3 hours later. That's not a boundary. That's an emotional theater. Say what you mean what you say. Keep it very simple. If the conversation becomes insulting, I'm going to leave. Then, if the insults begin, I'm leaving, we can talk later. Leave. No final speech, no dramatic monologue, no 60-minute closing argument. Just enforce the boundary. The need under the behavior. Now, here's where emotional intelligence becomes important. Sometimes underneath manipulative behavior is legitimate emotional need. Connection, security, recognition, reassurance, attention, control, understanding. That does not excuse manipulation. But understanding the need may help you respond effectively. Someone says, "You never call me." Maybe the real message is, "I miss you." So you can say, "It sounds like you're feeling disconnected from me." Notice what you're doing. You're acknowledging the emotional without accepting the exaggeration. You're not agreeing that you never call, you're identifying the possible need. Or someone says, if you leave this job, you're going to destroy the team. Maybe the underlying issue is fear. You might say, it sounds like you're worried about how my departure will affect the team. Again, need, not tactic. Sometimes when people feel understood, the pressure drops. Sometimes it doesn't. But either way, you remain centered. Your body will tell you something is wrong. Pay attention to your body during certain conversations. Your heart rate increases, your chest tightens, you feel heat, your stomach changes, your breathing becomes shallow, you feel an urgent need to explain yourself. You want to escape. Your body is giving you information. The information is not automatically proof the other person is manipulating you, but it is a signal. Slow down. Your nervous system may have detected conflict before your conscious mind organized the details. Take a breath. Look at the facts. Ask the question. What am I feeling? What am I being pushed to do? Why does it need to happen right now? This is the pressure check. Fear, action, urgency, slow it down. You do not have to make major decisions while your nervous system is in a flight or fight state. In fact, that's probably one of the worst times to make them. Document patterns, not feelings. If you're dealing with serious manipulation in business, family, legal matters, or another high conflict situation, document the patterns. Dates, statements, requests, outcomes. Not, John is a narcissistic psychopath. That's a diagnosis and an opinion, right? On June 3rd, John requested access to the account. I declined. John stated that if I refused, the family would blame me. He repeated the request 4 times. See the difference? Facts. Observable behavior. The documentation helps you step outside of emotion. It can also be useful if you later need to explain the pattern to a therapist, an attorney, human resources, or any other professional. Facts travel better than labels. I've learned that lesson in almost every area of my life. Document what happened. Let qualified people determine what the pattern means. The final test. Here is my final test for manipulation. Can I say no without being punished? Think about that. Can I disagree without being humiliated? Can I ask for time without being threatened? Can I request for clarification without being attacked? Can I maintain a boundary without the entire relationship being placed on trial? Healthy people can be disappointed. Healthy people can become angry. Healthy people can disagree, but healthy relationships eventually make room for autonomy. Manipulative relationships repeatedly punish autonomy. Your no becomes betrayal. Your boundary becomes an attack. Your independence becomes disrespect. Your questions become disloyalty. Watch the patterns, because love without autonomy becomes control. Friendship without autonomy becomes obligation. Business without autonomy becomes coercion. And family without autonomy can become a prison with family photographs on the walls. What I had to learn. I've been through enough in my life to know that people will try to define you. They will tell you who you are. They will tell you what you meant. They will tell you what you remember. They will tell you what you should feel. And if you're not careful, you can spend years defending yourself inside somebody else's story. I did. I explained. I argued. I reacted. I made podcasts. I'm as guilty as anybody else. I tried to make people understand because of the frustration. And eventually, I learned something. Not everybody wants to understand you. Some people want to understand access to you. Some people want compliance. Some people want agreement. Some people want a reaction. And the moment you understand that, you stop wasting energy trying to solve the wrong problem. You stop asking, how do I make them understand? And you start asking, what behavior am I willing to accept? That's where power changes hands. Take your emotions back. I want you to remember something. Your emotions belong to you. Your time belongs to you. Your decisions belong to you. That does not mean you become cold. It does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you never compromise. Healthy relationships require compromise. Healthy businesses require negotiations. Healthy families require patience, but compromise is chosen. Manipulation is pressured. Learn the difference. When you feel that pressure is rising, pause. I know it's hard. You know, real quick, one of the things that I've learned to do lately, because the pressure's been really high, and this isn't the right way. If you can pause and stay in the conversation, do it. But one of the things when I was first learning to readapt to my situation is I literally, if I started getting into a argumentative state, I would walk away and take a time out. I did that to myself because it's very hard sometimes to do that. But the best way to do it is to pause. When the accusation becomes vague, ask for the specific request. When the conversation expands, return to the original issue. When someone creates urgency, slow down. When guilt appears, ask whether you actually violated your values. When fear appears, ask the specific threat. When emotional temperatures rise, lower yours. And when someone refuses to respect your autonomy, pay attention. Because the most powerful thing you can do with a manipulator is not scream louder. It is not to become crueler. It is not to beat them at their own game. It is not to beat them at their own game. It is to become difficult to emotionally steer. They raise their voice, you slow yours. They create fog, you ask for clarity. They create urgency, you create time. They create guilt, you examine facts. They attack your character, you return to the issue. They demand an answer, you make a decision, your decision. My name is LeRoy Nellis. This is Resilience Radio. I've learned a lot about control. I've learned what it feels like when people try to control the environment around you. I've learned what it feels like when people try to control the story about you. And I've learned that one of the most important battles you will ever fight is the battle to maintain control over your own reactions. That is the truth. And because once somebody else controls your fear, your guilt, your anger, and your urgency, they may not need change. You're already moving where they want you to move. So slow down. Ask the question, what exactly are you asking me to do? Then listen. Not just to their words, listen to the pressure underneath them and make your own decision. Godspeed, stand for the Constitution, and never surrender the ability to think for yourself. I'm LeRoy Nellis, and I'll see you on the next Resilience Radio. Thank you so much, and God bless.
You pushed me down, thought I'd stay on the ground, counting me out like the numbers didn't matter. But pressure builds diamonds in the the dark, and I've been sharpening my edge in the chatter. Every scar turned into strategy, every setback fueled my clarity. I took the hits, learned the game, turned my losses into flame. Now I'm coming back strong and you'll remember my name. I'm rising through the fire.